A two-time WNBA championship coach just sat behind a podium and did something coaches are professionally trained to never do.
Yeah, she's a hard guard because she's coming with so much speed in the transition with the high drags. I mean, we were just trying to crowd her as much as we can and then shrink off certain other players.
She told the truth, not the polished, media-friendly version of the truth.
But yeah, we can learn from it and move forward.
Not the kind where you praise the opponent in vague terms and pivot to talking about your own.
She created, 14 assists. She's creating for her teammates as well too, when we started probably ball watching a little bit more.
Own team's effort. Sandy Brondello, the inaugural head coach of the Toronto Tempo, looked directly into a room full of cameras and voluntarily broke down, in specific tactical detail, exactly why her defense had absolutely no answer for Caitlin Clark. She didn't get tricked into it by a clever reporter's question. She wasn't cornered into an awkward admission. She chose to say it. And what she said should have every remaining team on Indiana's schedule scrambling for answers they probably don't have. Clark had just carved Toronto apart with 21 points and a season-high 14 assists, powering the Fever to a dominant 113-91 victory that wasn't even as close as the final score suggested. Sophie Cunningham exploded for 24 points off the bench, shooting a ridiculous 6 of 7 from three-point territory, while Kelsey Mitchell poured in 27 points on 81.8% shooting from the field. And that's the part nobody's talking about enough. Clark didn't even have her best shooting night. She made just 5 of 15 shots, including 1 of 8 from deep. Her worst shooting performance of the month, and it didn't matter one bit. Because what she did to that defense went far beyond putting the ball in the basket. But what Brondello said afterward, that's what turned a regular season win into a warning shot heard across the entire league. Here's the thing about coaching press conferences that casual
just trying to crowd her as much as we can and then shrink off certain other players.
Fans don't fully appreciate. There's an unwritten code every coach at every level of professional sports follows after a loss. You credit the opponent generically. You mention your team's fight. You say something about making adjustments. And you move on. It's a shield. A way to protect your game plan, your players' confidence, and your competitive edge going forward. Every coach knows this. Every coach follows it. Brondello is a two-time championship-winning coach, claiming her first title with the Phoenix Mercury in 2014, before taking the New York Liberty to the top in 2024. She also coaches the Australian Opals national team, leading the squad to a bronze medal at the 2024 Paris Olympics. This isn't some rookie coach caught off guard by her first tough loss. This is one of the most decorated minds in women's basketball history. And she threw that entire unwritten playbook in the trash. She didn't say Clark played well. She didn't keep it vague. She went specific. She named the exact defensive coverage her staff designed. She admitted calmly and methodically that it failed, not partially, completely. And the words she used, they told a story far bigger than any box score ever could. When a coach with that kind of resume stops protecting her competitive secrets and starts openly admitting defeat, it usually means one thing.
When Slim wasn't there and Julie wasn't there, they were our two main players that were guarding her to a high level. And Maria, she played hard, but Caitlin is just really too crafty.
She's reached a point where pretending a solution exists would have been more embarrassing than admitting the truth. And that truth, it's about to make every other coaching staff in the WNBA very, very uncomfortable. Let's break down exactly what Toronto tried to do, because the strategy itself wasn't flawed. It was textbook. Brondello described it clearly. Crowd Clark, shrink off certain other players. In basketball terms, that means you load up defensive attention on the primary threat, commit extra bodies to take away her driving lanes and shooting space, and deliberately accept risk on the weaker offensive options elsewhere on the floor. You're essentially betting that the role players around the star can't make you pay consistently enough to outscore the damage you're preventing by limiting Clark. It's a sound approach. It's worked against elite scorers throughout basketball history.
Caitlin's a great player, and she certainly, she created, 14 assists. She's creating for her teammates as well, too, when we started probably ball watching a little bit more.
You force the best player into tough, contested looks and dare everyone else to beat you. Mathematically, it usually favors the defense. Except Caitlin Clark doesn't operate inside normal mathematical models. She read the scheme in real time. She processed exactly where the help was coming from, where the gaps were opening, and instead of forcing her own shot into that wall of bodies, she weaponized the defense's own structure against them. Every extra defender Toronto threw at her created an open teammate somewhere else, and Clark found them, every single time. Brondello called her too crafty, not too tall, not too fast, not too strong, crafty. That word does heavy lifting in basketball circles. It speaks to processing speed, court vision, the ability to read a defense mid-action and make the exact right decision in a fraction of a second. Toronto loaded the floor against Clark, and she made the defense pay through her teammates instead of through her own scoring. That's not a player having a lucky night.
That is the difference from Caitlin Clark and every other guard in this league. She can fill it up the entire stat sheet.
That's a player solving a complex defensive puzzle on the fly, faster than the coaching staff could counter it. And the scariest part, the teammates she was feeding were absolutely scorching the net. Mitchell and Cunningham combined to shoot 15 of 18 from the field, including 9 of 11 from three-point range. Clark's vision turned good shooters into unstoppable ones. Toronto's own scheme created the wide-open looks. They were essentially beating themselves, and Clark was the one pulling the strings. Here's where Brondello's admission went from concerning to genuinely alarming. She said her defenders started ball watching. If you don't speak coaching language, that might sound like a minor complaint. It's not. Ball watching is one of the most damning things a coach can say about a defense. It means players abandon their assigned responsibilities because the action happening with the ball was so compelling, so threatening, that their survival instincts overrode their discipline. Defenders don't ball watch because they're lazy or don't care. They ball watch because they're overwhelmed. The offensive action in front of them is creating so many threats simultaneously that their brains can't keep up with the decision tree. Do I stay with my assignment? Do I help on the drive? Do I rotate to the roller? By the time they process the options, it's too late.
But yeah, we can learn from it and move forward.
So they freeze and just watch. That's cognitive overload, and Clark caused it across an entire defensive unit. Clark had 9 assists by halftime alone, then kept the pressure rolling through the second half. 14 assists against a defense specifically built to limit you isn't just a stat. It's documented proof that everything Toronto designed to slow her down actually made her more dangerous. The extra attention didn't contain her. It fueled her. And when Brondello stammered through her post-game explanation, tripping over her own words mid-sentence while trying to describe what happened,
Caitlin's a great player, and she certainly, she created, 14 assists. She's creating for her teammates as well, too, when we started probably ball watching a little bit more.
That wasn't scripted talking points. That was a championship caliber coach still processing the magnitude of what she just watched unfold on her own court. Brondello tried to offer some context. She pointed out that Toronto's 2 primary defenders for the Clark assignment were unavailable. On the surface, that sounds like a reasonable explanation. Injuries disrupt rotations. Players who aren't in the lineup can't guard anyone. Fair enough. But think about what that excuse actually reveals. If the explanation for this level of defensive collapse is our best 2 Clark defenders weren't playing, then the follow-up question writes itself. What happens when they are? Because the honest answer, based on everything we've seen, is that nobody on that roster, healthy or injured, has demonstrated a consistent ability to contain what Clark does when she's operating at full capacity. The Tempo's talent is still figuring out how to play with one another, and their front court has been in and out of the lineup. That's the reality of an expansion franchise in its first season. But Clark doesn't wait for opponents to figure things out. She punishes you right now with whatever you put on the floor. The missing personnel might have made the margin slightly smaller, But 14 assists and a defense reduced to spectators isn't a problem that two individual role players solve. That's a systemic issue. And every team still on Indiana's schedule shares the same vulnerability. To fully understand the weight of what happened, you need to zoom out and look at the trajectory Clark is on this season. Because this wasn't an isolated performance. It was the latest entry in what's becoming one of the most statistically dominant stretches in WNBA history. Clark became the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 250 points and 100 assists in a single season, achieving the feat 3 games quicker than anyone before her. In 2024, the former Iowa superstar recorded 8 games with at least 20 points and 10 assists, the most in WNBA history. Just 13 games into this season, she already has 4 such outings, putting her on pace to obliterate her own record. She leads the entire WNBA in assists at 8.3 per game, and she's doing all of this while still rounding back into form. Context matters here. Clark's 2025 campaign was riddled with injuries that limited her to just 13 games. She missed most of the regular season and all of the playoffs. There were genuine questions heading into this year about whether she'd return at the same level. Those questions have been answered emphatically.
That is the difference from Caitlin Clark and every other guard in this league. She can fill it up the entire stat sheet.
She's not just back. She's operating at a level that makes championship coaches publicly wave the white flag. Clark was named the Eastern Conference Player of the Week for Week 5, and she totaled 76 points across wins over the Washington Mystics, Chicago Sky, and Connecticut Sun, marking the most by any player in the East. Indiana has gone 5-1 in their last 6 games, now sitting at 9-5, third in the East. The Fever aren't just winning, they're surging, and Clark is the engine behind every bit of that momentum. Now let's be fair. Clark's game isn't without legitimate criticism. She averages a league-leading 5.2 turnovers per game, and that number has followed her since her rookie season. There are moments where her ambition outpaces execution, where the behind-the-back pass doesn't connect, where the no-look dime ends up in the wrong hands. It's real, it's measurable, and it gives her critics something to grab onto every single week. But here's the part those critics conveniently leave out. Her turnover numbers exist alongside some of the strongest impact metrics in the league. Through the early part of the 2026 season, the Fever have outscored opponents by 32 points with Clark on the floor. Her assist rates have consistently been among the highest in the league, approaching 50% of teammates' baskets while she is on the court, and she remains one of the WNBA's premier offensive engines. The turnovers are a byproduct of the same thing that makes her unstoppable: volume. She handles the ball more than almost anyone in the league. She makes more reads, more passes, more decisions per game than most players make in a week. Some of those decisions won't work, but the net effect of everything she does bends the game so dramatically in Indiana's favor that the giveaways become a cost of doing business. A cost every coach in this league would happily accept. Clark joined Diana Taurasi as only the second player in WNBA history to record multiple games with 20-plus points and 14-plus assists. When you're sharing company with Taurasi in the record books, the turnover conversation starts looking a lot less relevant. So where does this leave the rest of the WNBA? If Brondello's conventional defensive approach, the textbook strategy that's worked against elite scorers for decades, failed completely against Clark's processing speed and court vision, what options are actually left? Think about the choices facing every coaching staff with Indiana on their upcoming schedule. You can try the same crowd and shrink approach Toronto used and hope your personnel is good enough to hold up where theirs didn't. But you just watched a 2-time champion coach run that exact playbook and get dismantled. You can switch to a completely different scheme, maybe play her straight up without help defenders. But that means trusting a single player to contain someone who's averaging over 20 points and 8 assists per game. Good luck. You can accept the damage, let Clark do her thing, and try to outscore the Fever on the other end. But with Indiana's defense improving, The Fever have held opponents to under 84 points per game on average in the 6 games since their blowout loss to Portland, so the outscore them plan isn't exactly safe either. Each path carries enormous risk. None come with a guarantee, and that's the real shift that Brondello's press conference illuminated. The competitive question has fundamentally changed. It's no longer, how do we stop Caitlin Clark? It's how do we survive what she does to us and still find a way to win the overall game? That's a much harder question, and based on what we just heard from one of the smartest coaches in women's basketball, nobody has figured out the answer yet. The Indiana Fever scored 113 points against Toronto, setting a new franchise high in a regulation game. The result extended Indiana's winning streak to 4 straight games, and the woman standing at the center of all of it didn't even need her shot to fall to make it happen. That's the detail that should genuinely terrify the rest of the league. Clark's worst shooting night of the month still produced a season-high 14 assists and a 22-point blowout. If this is what she does when she's off, what does the league do when she's on? When the threes are falling and the assists are flowing and the defense is watching instead of defending? Brondello didn't have to say any of this publicly. She could have given the standard 2-minute press conference. Credit Clark generically, talk about her own team's growth, mention the missing players, and walk away. Nobody would have questioned it. Instead, she chose transparency. She detailed the exact philosophy her coaching staff deployed. She acknowledged the personnel gaps. She admitted in basketball language anyone can understand that her team's discipline eroded as the game progressed. And she summed it all up with 3 words that every remaining opponent on Indiana's schedule should tattoo on the inside of their eyelids. Too crafty. Learn from it. Move forward. Translation: we had no answer. We still don't. And we're not entirely sure one exists. The Fever are now 9-5 and hitting their stride, with their superstar point guard's electric play taking the WNBA world by storm. Every coaching staff preparing to face Indiana just received a very public, very detailed warning about exactly what they're walking into. The only question left is whether any of them can do what Sandy Brondello couldn't. Based on what we just witnessed, don't bet on it.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.